304 wrapped up, and what was that main event? What happened? Belal beat Leon, dominated some of the rounds, but it was a good card overall, I think. You know, Belal's fight with Leon wasn't super action-packed, but I think it was actually better than expected. A lot of people thought it was going to be a complete snooze fest, but the fact that Belal did so well, and most people did not see that, I think actually made the fight more enjoyable, or at least, I don't know about the word enjoyable, more entertaining than we thought it was going to be. So I thought the main event performed better than it was on paper. The co-main event absolutely delivered. Aspinall beating Curtis Blaydes like that, establishing himself as rightfully the guy who should be fighting John Jones next, where he defended his interim title and destroyed both Sergey Pavlovich and Curtis Blaydes. At the time, two of the top heavyweight contenders. So amazing co-main event. The Paddy Pimblett fight was interesting but entertaining. The interesting part is Bobby Green shooting a takedown after getting leg kicked. That part made no sense for him to do. Like, he went into Paddy Pimblett's strongest area and got submitted so quickly. Like, he was not even close to being as good as Paddy on the ground. I thought Rodrigues versus Duncan was pretty fun. Allen versus Giga Chikagze was probably the best fight on the card, or one of the best fights. I enjoyed that fight a lot. Prelims were pretty good. Early prelims delivered. I thought the card performed very well. Even though there are a lot of favorites on the card that people are coping about right now. I see it all over. Even I was coping originally, and I had an epiphany about the welterweight division after that main event. A lot of questions got answered after seeing that fight between Leon and Belal. The weight class is just not as good as 135 to 155, right? It was always like in contention whether welterweight is among the best divisions in the UFC, but I think after that fight between the two top-ranked fighters, Leon is the champ, Belal was #1 contender. After seeing the performance of both of those fighters, there's no way they're nearly as skilled as the best lightweights, the best featherweights, and the best bantamweights. No champion from 135 to 155 in the modern age is losing to a jab and a double leg. Belal Muhammad beat Leon Edwards by throwing a jab and shooting a double leg takedown, and that's pretty much it. I think 135, 145, 155 are so incredibly skilled. It's just not fair to compare any other weight class to them. I would say what's more comparable is welterweight to flyweight. I think those two weight classes are more comparable in skill after seeing the two best welterweights fight. So that was one question that was answered. Another question that was answered about welterweight is that none of them can ever be compared to GSP. Don't ever compare any welterweight to GSP ever again. Tyron Woodley was supposed to be better than GSP. Kamaru Usman was supposed to be better than GSP. Leon Edwards is supposed to be better than GSP. None of them compare to GSP. We also know now that Leon's boxing is not that good without his kicks. He has to kick in order for his boxing to really work. And Leon wasn't able to use his kicks effectively because Belal was putting too much pressure on Leon, and he kept up at an intelligent guard. He's always been a bit complacent and absent in exchanges, right? He's not really throwing much back at you. So like, if you keep a jab on him and just keep peppering him with punches, his head movement isn't good enough for him to get away from that, especially when the opponent has a wrestling presence in the cage. So like, Belal Muhammad is a good wrestler, evidently. Probably the best wrestler, or one of the best wrestlers that Leon's ever fought. He's comparable to maybe Usman with that kind of performance, at least. You know, if you compare the performances of Usman in their second fight and Belal Muhammad in their second fight, the wrestling was very dominant for both Belal and Usman. And Belal's gotten way better, you know, also physically stronger. My man looks like he's on the sauce. I don't know if he is, but he definitely looks like he matured again. Hit puberty twice. But Leon got absolutely ragdolled in that second round specifically when Belal was throwing him on his head. Like, we all thought that Leon's wrestling got way better, and it did. But we may have overestimated how much better Leon actually got in his wrestling and grappling. So both of these things seem to be true. Belal's wrestling is very good and can be a problem for everyone that he fights. Interesting against Shavkat, though. The performance against Usman in their third fight was an Usman that was out of his prime and older, coming off a head kick knockout, right? He wasn't the same guy as he was in the second fight. And Colby Covington didn't fight the same as he usually does. So his wrestling didn't progress to a level that we thought would shut out Usman and Colby in their primes. The good thing that Leon did, though, was reverse and get the back of Belal Muhammad, right? His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu absolutely looked top-notch, but everything else, not really. I mean, he landed a couple good left hands. He landed a good elbow in the fifth. But yeah, man, I was coping a little bit after the fight was over, or actually not even after the fight was over, it was during the fight. I'm like, there's no way Belal's doing this to Leon. This is absolutely insane. But then when I saw other people's cope, it made me come back to reality about where Leon actually stands with his skills. It seems like most people's understanding of Leon Edwards solely revolves around the Usman fights and nothing else. It seems like most people have not watched the majority of Leon's career, because I see a lot of people talking about how Leon wasn't aggressive enough, right? Where was that aggression? Why wasn't he going after Belal? Why was he he so complacent and patient even while he's losing the fight? Leon's always fought like that, or usually fights like that. With a few exceptions, Leon has always been a point fighter. Always. He has like 2 knockouts and he's hurt opponents multiple times, but he never goes for the finish like that. If he doesn't KO you with 1 shot, he's not really trying to finish you. That's who Leon has always been, but the Usman knockout has like warped people's opinions or their understanding of Leon Edwards. One fight in his entire career changed what people thought of him, when he's always been the same guy, and that was one of the few exceptions where he found a head kick knockout in the 5th round of a fight he was losing. But against Belal Muhammad, he tried to throw the left high kick. He did. Belal was able to defend it. He understands Leon's game. It wasn't going to get beat the same way Usman did, where he even believed. Belal even said that Usman in their 2nd and 3rd fights was not the same fighter. I think Usman was the same fighter in the 2nd fight. I think he was still in his prime. But in the 3rd fight, no. Usman was definitely a little bit over the hill. You could definitely tell he slowed down a bit. Older age, coming off a knockout loss. His wrestling was so much worse in that 3rd fight. And that's another thing as well. This is one of the few times, actually the only time, that Leon fought someone who can take him down and won't just let him give up his back and stand up. I've talked about it for years, how Leon always gives his back up when he gets taken to the ground and tries to stand up by hand fighting. And I always mention when he goes up against someone who's not going to allow him to do that because they're going to get his back, that's when Leon's going to have the hardest time. But I did not think Belal would be that guy. I thought maybe Shavkat would be him, because Usman doesn't get your back. He doesn't go for submissions. Colby rarely does. Like, he's done it a couple times before. He tried to get Jorge's back, but it's not a real thing that he likes to go for. It's not part of his style. And when he fought Leon, he wasn't the same guy. Belal Muhammad, on the other hand, I expect him to purely wrestle and not try to get the back of Leon, but Belal's a smart fighter. You know, he studied that part of Leon's game and capitalized whenever Leon gave up his back. You know, that's what happens when Leon tries to give up his back and stand up, when he goes against someone who actually has a well-rounded grappling style. But that's the state of the welterweight division, and why I believe it's not as good as some of the weight classes below it, you know. Another question that got answered is that if Islam Makhachev ever fought Leon, if that super fight ever happened, he would have destroyed Leon. Islam Makhachev would not even need to use his wrestling to beat Leon Edwards. He's a way better striker. A way better striker. His boxing alone would give Leon so many problems. If a jab like that from Belal Muhammad flusters Leon Edwards to that extent, he was not ready for Islam Makhachev at all. But now that Belal beat Leon, we're probably not going to see Islam fight for the welterweight title until Belal loses, right? I believe like Belal trained with Khabib before and stuff, so he knows those guys. And them being all Muslim, I don't know if they would want to fight each other. But then again, Mokaev did fight Manel, Kape. I have no idea if they would fight each other, but I wonder if Islam would actually want to go up now, and would Belal fight any challenger? But that's the other thing here. Who does Belal Muhammad fight next? I think it should be Shavkat, which is kind of an interesting matchup because we all expected Leon to beat Belal Muhammad, right? With that win, we thought his next matchup would probably be like Islam Makhachev. In the meantime, as Shavkat fights another contender to establish himself as the #1 contender for the title, right? Let's say Islam gets past Armin, he fights Leon for the welterweight title, then the winner of that would fight maybe Shavkat or Jack Della Maddalena or whoever is fighting to become the #1 contender, right? That's what we thought was going to happen for the welterweight division. But now that Belal beat Leon and Islam might not fight him, you can't give Leon a rematch, right? He wasn't dominant enough. He had 2 title defenses, which I don't think is enough to warrant an immediate rematch, you know? There is something with the no contest before, and Leon was winning their first fight, but he didn't win, you know? So, like, it's a bit different. If he actually beat Belal Muhammad and knocked him out or whatever in the first fight, lose in the second fight, I think then you can warrant a rematch. I've seen some people say Kamaru Usman, but Usman already got his immediate rematch, and he lost to Leon, right? He lost twice to Leon. In fact, he lost his last 3 fights. There's no way you can give him another title shot, you know? He has to fight someone else. So I think it's either Shavkat or there's another fight that happens for the #1 contender spot. Yeah, man, that was a very interesting fight. To see Belal Muhammad perform that well, he's way better than we thought he was. The welterweight champion. Out of all fighters to become the welterweight champion, the least that we thought of was Belal Muhammad. But you have to give Belal that respect. He beat Leon. He improved a lot, and he proved all his doubters wrong. I was one of his doubters, and we have to acknowledge how good the guy actually is. Is he the best welterweight ever? No. I don't think he's the best welterweight right now, but he's definitely one of them, in my opinion, right? I would say maybe Shavkat is the best welterweight, then it's probably Belal, then maybe Jack Della Maddalena. But the thing about Jack Della, because a lot of people bring him up in terms of if he's the best welterweight, his style is so specific, it's hard to really rate how good he is. A heavy boxing style with decent takedown defense. It's hard to see how he beats guys like Belal Muhammad, for an example, but he does very well against guys like Shavkat, right? stylistically, he is Shavkat's hardest fight because he could defend the takedowns. If Jeff Neal could, I'm pretty sure Jack Della probably can. He's the best boxer in the weight class. I don't think Shavkat would be able to box with him. He's the most difficult fight for Shavkat Rakhmonov, but he probably loses pretty badly to Belal, right? If he can't stop Belal's takedowns, he's gonna lose that fight by a decision. But then you got Leon. Leon matches up very well against certain styles and not so well against other styles. I think he does very well against Jack. I think he does well against Ian Gary, Michael Page. But then against like wrestlers who can grapple, like Shavkat, Belal, and maybe even Gilbert Burns, if Burns was in his prime still, those would be very difficult fights for Leon Edwards. But for the next fight, I think it should be Belal versus Shavkat. And then for Leon Edwards, give him either Jack Della Maddalena or Ian Gary. I really like the Jack fight for him. Can you imagine the kickboxing of Leon versus the boxing of Jack? But I'm pretty sure Leon would try to take him to the ground and submit him. But I don't know if he could because Jack's takedown defense got a lot better in his last fight against Burns. And I'm pretty sure Jack would expect Leon to wrestle, so those would be good fights. What about Tom Aspinall beating Curtis Blaydes and proving himself to be the true heavyweight champion? He defended the belt before Jones did, and he's fighting the top contenders, whereas Jones is going to be fighting an old Stipe Miocic. And Aspinall called out Jones in a very gentleman kind of way, and that has to be the next fight for Aspinall. But watch when Jones beats Stipe and just retires. Like, Jones really thinks that beating Stipe is such a big thing for his legacy. Like, might as well go and beat Fedor too, and beat Cain Velasquez right now, and go fight JDS. Like, beating an old fighter who's out of his prime, even though he's regarded as the greatest in the division, it doesn't really do much for your legacy if you're not fighting them at their best. Because I think Aspinall beats Jones. He's a very tough stylistic matchup. A guy who could defend takedowns faster than Jones, bigger than Jones, hits harder, has good jiu-jitsu, good wrestling, very good footwork. The main weakness that he has is that he keeps his chin open, but Jones isn't a power puncher. So this is the toughest matchup in Jones' career. And here's the other thing that maybe Jones is not seeing in the long run. Tom Aspinall might go down as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, right? At least there's the potential for him to do so if he just keeps cleaning out his division, right? And if Jones never fights him, he may have missed out on the opportunity on beating an actual prime, all-time great heavyweight. But instead, he wants to go and fight the older guy who's out of his prime, who hasn't fought in a long time, who potentially Tom Aspinall in the future can surpass. Because what did John Jones say before about Aspinall and Pavlovich and all these other guys? He says he doesn't know if any of them would have a legacy in the future. Well, Tom Aspinall has a legacy now. He just beat Sergey Pavlovich, he beat Alexander Volkov before, and he just beat Curtis Blaydes as well. He defeated 3 of the top contenders in the heavyweight division who are all still top 5. Well, I don't know if Pavlovich is anymore after losing to Volkov, but at the time, Pavlovich was like number 2. And if Aspinall beats like Cyril Gane, which I think he does with his wrestling and jiu-jitsu, I mean, this guy is going to be one of the greatest heavyweights ever. If he keeps it up, of course. Not now, but, you know, if he keeps getting these wins against contenders, which I think he will, he seems like the best heavyweight on the planet right now. John Jones may have missed out on fighting an actual prime all-time great heavyweight. So that's the next fight for Aspinall. As for Curtis Blaydes, he could fight like Alexander Volkov, or maybe a rematch with Pavlovich, even though he got destroyed by Pavlovich, so it doesn't make sense there. But Blaydes just like fought everybody else. And I don't want to see him fight some blob. Then we go to the weirdest fight of the entire card. Paddy Pimblett submits Bobby Green with a submission in the first round. Triangle choked him to sleep. There ain't no way anyone's calling him King Green after that. Bro's got to change his name. Why is Bobby Green shooting a takedown on Paddy in the first round too, where he's not sweaty at all? Yeah, the kicks were landing from Paddy and he wasn't that comfortable, but Bobby Green in no situation should be shooting takedowns on Paddy Pimblett ever. That is the only place Paddy's great at. If he's having trouble in the stand-up with Paddy, he's only going to get smoked on the ground very quickly, and it showed that Paddy is very good on the ground. The transition from the guillotine to a triangle choke and then eventually attack the arm for an armbar was beautiful stuff from Paddy Pimblett, but we know about that, you know? We know Paddy's so good in that area. The worst place that he fights is on the feet. And it didn't really play out that long, you know? Bobby Green wasn't striking with him for like rounds. It was a couple minutes, right? It was like 1 minute of striking and then he decided to shoot a takedown after he took a leg kick. Paddy was literally given a free win. He was literally just given a free win. That was the easiest fight of his entire career because his striking opponent decided to wrestle with him. When does Bobby Green wrestle? Offensively, that is. Like, he shot takedowns a couple times, like against Thiago Moises, and he shot once on Jim Miller in his last fight in the 3rd round, where Jim Miller was just all beaten up. up. But in the first round against a specialist, one of the best jiu-jitsu guys in the lightweight division, you're going to decide to shoot a takedown on him? I'm surprised he didn't shoot a takedown on Islam. Why didn't he shoot a takedown on, Mokaev if this is the way that he fights? He was losing a bit of the stand-up against Paddy, but not enough where it's like, okay, let's abandon the striking, let's go straight into the grappling now. Bobby Green said he's going to go to England in Paddy Pimblett's hometown, beat him up, and show everybody why this is not the guy that should be a superstar, right? Just to go out there, get kicked a couple times, abandon the game plan, shoot a takedown, and get choked to sleep within like 30 seconds once I went to the ground. That was the worst performance out of Bobby Green I've ever seen. Usually he's a pretty good fighter, and usually he's actually quite intelligent with his game plans. But he just displayed one of the worst game plans, or should I say adjustments in a fight, that we've ever seen in the sport. Unless you're Islam Makhachev or Arman Tsarukyan, or maybe Charles Oliveira, you should never be shooting takedowns on Paddy Pimblett, ever, no matter who it is. Even Dustin knows not to shoot takedowns on Paddy. Even Jared Gordon knew not to shoot takedowns on Paddy. But it was a great win for Paddy Pimblett, the best opponent he's ever faced, and submitted him in the first round. He's going to be ranked in the top 15 and probably going to go up against maybe a top 10 fighter next. He called out Renato Moicano. That's actually a very good fight because both guys are really good on the ground. They got some striking to them. I think Renato's a better striker than Paddy, but Paddy has more power. If the fight goes to the ground, I don't know who's going to win that exchange, because Renato seems to be better with his control, but Paddy seems to be better with his submissions. That should be a really good fight. And as for Bobby Green, I mean, just retire at this point, man. You're shooting takedowns on Paddy, just retire. Gregory Rodrigues defeated Christian Leroy Duncan by a decision. I didn't expect this fight to go to a decision out of all of them, right? Because both guys usually go for the finish. Greg Rodrigues, especially with the way that he fights, I mean, the guy's a Terminator. They call him, or Robocop, I guess. But the man's gonna be walking home with more battle scars. He gets a new cut in like every single fight. They're like souvenirs at this point. Oh, I got this cut in England. I got this cut in America. I got this cut in Brazil. I got this cut. Like, he's gonna remember every single one of his fights just by the cosmetic damage. And it wasn't like Christian Leroy Duncan was beating him or anything. That cut opened up because of one elbow from Duncan. But Duncan was all lumped and bruised up. Like, you see his head? He came out there, his head was shaped normally. By the time the fight was over, he was looking like Graveler from Pokemon. That's how hard Robobama hits, man. Just completely big brothered. CLD. That sounds like a performance enhancing drug. Picking up and slamming him, rocking him with the right hand, hooks to the side of the head, had his back, going for the rear naked choke. Gregory Rodrigues completely dominated that fight. Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze was such a great fight, man. The pace those guys fought at was insane. They must have done like 50 laps around a track, constantly moving. I'm very impressed with Giga Chikadze's cardio because he's always gassing out in fights. I don't blame him for getting tired in that kind of pace against Arnold Allen. I mean, the guy was putting so much pressure on Giga. His footwork was on point, landing body shots. A lot of people missed that. A lot of left hands to the body from Arnold Allen. Powerful, landing clean as well. But Chikadze was trying to end Arnold Allen from the very first round. Both these guys were just throwing heat the whole time. It's kind of what we expected, or at least what we wanted from the Mokaev and Kape fight, but at least Allen and Chikadze delivered. But Allen's footwork just showed to be way too much, right? His footwork and pressure was everything. The way he was sidestepping away from the right hand from Chikadze was some very high level stuff, man. He took a lot of kicks to the arms, and he was still throwing with 100% power in the third round. Even asked for a 5-round fight because he knew that Chikadze wouldn't be able to keep up the pace with him. And the most impressive thing about all of it is Arnold Allen didn't even shoot a single takedown. He said the game plan was to wrestle, but he beat Giga Chikadze without even wrestling with him. Even Kelvin Kattar couldn't do that. Kelvin Kattar was wrestling from the first round to the fourth round with Chikadze to beat him. Allen didn't even need to do that. He beat him in a striking contest. Just goes to show you how good Arnold Allen actually is. Now, for sure, moving forward, Chikadze cannot talk about him destroying Max Holloway. What Allen just did to Chikadze, Holloway would have done 10 times worse, especially in a 5-round fight. And it was pretty funny. I think it was Allen's dad told him, hey, don't forget to say happy birthday to your mom, is it? Or grandma? Who do they call Nan in England? Is that the mother or the grandmother? But for his next fight, I think Arnold Allen should go up against a top 5 opponent. I mean, he's number 6, just beat Chikadze, so 100% should be fighting Yair Rodrigues, in my opinion. Yair versus Arnold Allen would be such a great fight for 5 rounds, though. That should like headline a fight night card. And as for Giga Chikagze, I say do Chikagze versus Bryce Mitchell. That'd be an interesting fight between opposites, striker versus grappler. But I wouldn't put that as like a headliner of a fight night card. That would probably be on like maybe headlining the prelims of a pay-per-view card or opening up the main card or something like that. Nathaniel Wood defeats Daniel Pineda by a decision. 29-27 is how I scored it. I thought he won the first round 10-9, even though it was close because Pineda came back in the end of that round, landing big ground and pound shots after reversing him using the Kimura. The second round though, I thought it was a 10-8 for Nathaniel Wood. Kicked him off his feet, rocked him a few times, landed big left hooks because Pineda wasn't able to see the left hook due to the damage on his right eye. And after almost getting finished multiple times in the fight, it's crazy to see that Daniel Pineda came back to win the third round. It was clear he was the better grappler of the two, right? He had to take the fight to the ground, use a size advantage, and even technically he showed to be a little bit superior to Nathaniel Wood, who's a well-rounded fighter. He has a good ground game, but Pineda has the veteran experience to rally back, even after taking so much damage to the leg, body, and head. The guy literally got knocked to the ground by a leg kick, a body kick, and a punch to the eye, and still found a way to win the third round after all of that damage. But what was up with Nathaniel Wood's fight IQ? Why was he going to the ground after clearly showing he's the better striker of the two, dropping Pineda, hurting him with almost every powerful strike he was landing, and over again, he was chasing the ground, where Pineda was able to keep him in the guard, even reversing him and getting on top. Like, the skills of Nathaniel Wood are really good, but his fight IQ is not the best, especially for a prospect that a lot of people have been really high about. But it was a good win for Nathaniel Wood overall. He seems a bit too small though for featherweight. Bruna Brasil beats Molly McCann by a decision. I picked Molly McCann to win the fight, but I talked about how dangerous Bruna Brasil is going to be from distance. Those kicks are just way too powerful for McCann, and the fact that Molly couldn't find her way in safely without getting knee to the body or kick to the body pretty much spelled her defeat, you know? If she can't get in on Bruna Brasil and land big punches, take her to the ground, try to submit her, all that stuff, she's going to lose the fight, you know? Even Brasil showed pretty good takedowns, even went for her back. It was a really good performance from Bruna Brasil, and now she is one of my favorite fighters. Jake Hadley won a decision against Caolan Loughran. I thought if he had a full camp, he would be able to beat Loughran, but even on short notice, looking really good in the striking, good left hands from a distance, moving around to his left, a bit too quickly for Loughran to catch up to, and Loughran was just so much slower in general, way more stiff, technically not even close to how good Hadley is in the stand-up, and I thought his wrestling would have been probably a difference maker in the fight, because he's big, he's strong, Hadley fought in a smaller weight class, you know, but the fact that Hadley was still able to defend the takedowns was very impressive, man. I've talked a lot about Jake Hadley throughout the years. I always thought he had good skills and just had to fine-tune a bit of his like strategy and tactics that he uses in a fight, and he did that beautifully here against Caolan Loughran. Muhammad Mokaev versus Manel Kape has to be like the most disappointing fight ever. These guys are willing to throw down before the fight even happened, right? 20 seconds before the fight, they were ready to go. They fought in the hotel, they fought like a couple months back, but when they get all the freedom to actually fight, they did nothing. They had a 15-minute face-off. Maybe Mokaev versus Kape should have been on the early prelims after all. You're right. Keep that energy when most of the fans are watching. That was a complete disgrace of a fight. In hindsight, though, it was very Mokaev-like. Actually, I don't even know if I can even say that because Mokaev barely shot takedowns. He technically outstruck Manel Kape, the best striker in the division now. No, I'm kidding. That was not the fight that most people were expecting, but I did think that Mokaev was going to win by a decision. I didn't think it was going to be that entertaining, but definitely more entertaining than it was. These guys just decided not to fight each other for most of it. Mokaev threw like a couple good kicks, you know, spinning kick to the head. He was going for the Barboza knockout and really won the fight just because he got a couple takedowns and he landed more kicks. First round was Kape's because he landed the bigger punch at the end of the round. For the whole rest of that round, Mokaev was just landing a bunch of kicks, you know. Second round goes to Mokaev for the kicks and takedown, but he should have gotten a point deduction. What was that? What was Mike Beltran doing? He was all like energized and yelling in Mokaev's face not to give him a point deduction though. Where's the point deduction? That's what we thought was gonna happen. This guy low-blowed Kape in the first round. He was pulling down his shorts. The man was trying to strip his opponent just to secure the takedown. And then he poked Kape in the eye as well. How is there not a point deduction? But then again, I do remember Herb Dean saying back when Khabib fought Conor that if a fighter is doing different foul moves, you can't deduct them a point for it because they're not the same foul. Which I don't even think is true, by the way. I think if you're doing any kind of foul, whether it's a low blow, grabbing the shorts, eye poking, If a fighter is following, they're following, and they should get a point deducted for it, especially Mokaev in that fight. And after a performance like that, Mokaev had the gall to ask for a title shot. I mean, I understand, 7-fight win streak, only 23 years old. On paper, it looks amazing, but then when you look at his fights, right, when you actually watch his fights, there's no way you can give him a title shot. He couldn't finish an opponent who had a broken toe. Shout out to Conor McGregor. Kape actually fought 2.5 more rounds with a broken toe, where Conor pulled out of an entire fight because of one. But I don't want to give Kape too much credit for fighting with the broken toe because he didn't do really anything for the whole fight. In fact, Manel Kape is allergic on putting on a performance against other ranked fighters. He looks amazing against non-ranked guys, which even tricks the fans into thinking like Felipe Dos Santos is that good, you know? Well, in Felipe's next fight, he didn't really look as good as we thought he did. And now Manel Kape going up against one of the higher ranked guys, he doesn't look that good either. So it's like, okay, maybe Manel Kape is just overrated. Like his best win in the UFC is against David Vorak, the same guy that Steve Erceg beat in his debut. That's the guy in the flyweight division because flyweight is in shambles at this point. Probably the worst state it's ever been in its entire history, with so many boring fighters at the top and so many pullouts as well. Every flyweight is pulling out of their fights. How many times is Manel Kape supposed to fight somebody and either he or his opponent pulled out? At this point, Steve Erceg is like the final hope of the flyweight division. He's the most exciting fighter there. He has the highest potential for anyone rising up in the rankings. And he arguably beat Pantoja already. Pantoja's beating everybody else. Steve Erceg came the closest to beating him, and I did think he won that decision. What a disappointing fight from both fighters, and shout out to the UFC for even moving that fight lower to the prelims. Can you imagine if they fought like that on the main card? The UFC probably knew that Mokaev and Kape were kind of capping. You know, they were kind of not really going to fight the way that the fans thought, so they moved them in the early prelims. That's what it seems like. So for their next fights, I would say Muhammad Mokaev, who's number 6, beat the number 8 Manel Kape. Maybe he fights Emil Abazi, or actually Brennan Moreno. Brennan Moreno would be a good fight for Muhammad Mokaev. And Manel Kape, give him like Tim Elliott or something. Or you could run it back with Nicolau again. But no, it's giving him a favor to avenge his loss to him. Give him Tim Elliott instead. Until he puts on a performance that shows that he deserves to avenge his loss to Nicolau or get the opportunity to fight Nicolau again, he should be fighting someone like Tim Elliott. Oban Elliott performed pretty well, beating Preston Parsons, defending all the takedowns, and some of those shots were actually really good from Parsons. Just shows you how good Oban Elliott's wrestling defense is. Good counter punches, good jabs, and slipping a lot of the big power punches from Parsons, right? Parsons throwing very, very heavy. Modestas Bukauskas getting a arm triangle choke on Marcin Prachnio. This fight was wild. Both guys rocking each other in the second round. Crazy how Prachnio landed a head kick in that close of range with Bukauskas, man. Prachnio's got such a weird style, dipping his head all over the place, awkward punches at weird angles, but Bukauskas was clearly the better grappler of the two, whereas in the striking it was a bit back and forth. But I did think Bukauskas is overall just the better fighter. Sam Patterson also wins by submission with an arm triangle choke. Once the fight got to the ground, Crosby had no idea on how to fight Patterson. I mean, once he was in the arm triangle, he didn't do anything to actually get out of it. He even was bumping Patterson, right? Hip bumping him, which actually makes the arm triangle even worse because he's going to be bumping Patterson on the side, which is where Patterson wants to go. And it's not the only time. Even the last time he got submitted, again showed he had no idea on how to handle the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu of his opponent. Decent boxer, but not a great grappler and kind of low fight IQ because he clinched up with Patterson, which got him taken to the ground. There was a lot of that on this card. Mick Parkin landing the jab right overhand, eventually knocking out Bresky. And it's funny because Bresky threw the same combo first, then Parkin mimicked it, but his had way more power. He was a much bigger fighter. Bresky could probably make light heavyweight. And then Shauna Bannon fought Alice Ardeline. And I think Ardeline won. I was kind of distracted that whole fight. It was Ardeline won, right guys? Do Norma Dumont versus Alice Ardeline next. That would be an amazing stylistic matchup. Both have very good assets on competing with each other. Nah, but it was an okay fight. Bannon winning by decision. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe and leave the comments below what you guys think about the card. What do you guys think about the main event? Who should these fighters fight next? And I'll see you guys in the next video.